because
what is the shift that needs to happen so that we are experiencing more joy in growing and aging and throughout all the years, not just when we're 70 and 80s and 60s and that, but even too, there's a piece around, those that are in their teens. And it's like, one day you're going to be 30
Mhm.
and it's not
Well,
scary.
so there's a couple of things there. Number one, you make the point very nicely. We are all aging. It is not something old people do, right? And now we phrase it differently, and you phrased it
Yeah.
differently just then. You said it's growing up versus aging.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. I mean,
So true.
your babies are aging, old people are growing up. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just they're really interchangeable, but it is the phrasing though that shows you the difference in that, we think about aging as kind of this negative thing, but we think about growing up as this positive thing.
So
So maybe
true.
we need to shift those words. We need to talk about my 70-year-old self growing up,
Yeah.
and what am I going to be when I finally grow up and I'm 75, that kind of thing instead. Um,
Unleash the untapped potential within you as we dive fearlessly into the realms of healing, personal growth, self-love, and uncharted territories of the human experience. Join us as we navigate relationships, conquer career and business milestones, and explore the depths of spirituality. This isn't just a podcast, it's a manifesto for the resilient, the ambitious, the soul-searching women and men of today. Grab your coffee and let's dive in with Beyond the Surface.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day it is that you are tuning in and watching. Welcome back to another episode here on Beyond the Surface. And today I am honored to be in conversation with you, Corinne Amin. Thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation. We are diving into what I know to be is going to be a beautiful conversation around age and to unpack that. So, first and foremost, thank you so much for being here. I'm honored and I'm grateful.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, I always love to give you the space first before we dive in to just share a little bit more about who you are. I know you've written a book, but I'd love to give you the floor to share a little bit more about who you are and what you do and whatever speaks and is true right now.
So I am Dr. Corinne Amin, and I run a care management agency. I'm in Greensboro, North Carolina. And in addition to doing that, I have written a book recently, which we'll talk a little bit more later, I'm sure. And then I'm also the mother to 4 teenagers at the moment. So that keeps
Fun.
me quite busy as well and stressed at different times. But that's the synopsis: job and 4 teenagers. That's all you need to know right there.
I love it. How many girls, boys? What do you have?
2 of each.
2. Beautiful. What a lovely balance.
Yep.
Oh, I know we were talking a little bit more before we kind of hit record and talked about how you got into this line of work around care management. And, one of the questions that I was kind of thinking about and sitting with beforehand was where in your own experience, have there ever been fears in your own journey of aging?
Oh, I think that's true for everybody. I mean, and I'm
Hmm.
certainly no exception to that. We are in an incredibly ageist society. You all you have to do is turn on the TV or open a magazine or walk by ads on the street, and you're going to be faced with, get this cream that's going to stop your aging, and or plastic surgery or Botox or the all of the things. And so I think that trains in us from a very early age that aging is bad. My favorite story of this is she was 12 at the time. We took her to see a Bruce Springsteen concert. And Bruce Springsteen, he's in his 70s and he's in really good shape. And at the end of the concert, he rips open his shirt and, he's up there with his 6-pack abs in his 70s. Thank you. Playing his guitar and being a rock star. And we're driving home and she says, he shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have opened up his shirt like that. He's a dirty old man. And I, being her mother, said, well, let's dig into that. Why do you think that? And she said, well, he just is. And I said, well, who's told you that Bruce Springsteen is a dirty old man? And she said, well, he's old. So of course he's a dirty old man. And that is a perfect example to me because she's 12 and I certainly have not taught her that. Her father has not taught her that. But somewhere our society has taught her that as you get older, you're automatically, no matter who you are or what your personality qualities are, you are automatically a dirty old man. And so that is the kind of messaging we are surrounded by from childhood. And that makes us all not want to become them. It's an us versus them. I don't want to become those old people because of all the things that we're portraying that is going to be. And so I don't want to be that. Why would I want to be that when that is the messaging that I'm being sold on a day-to-day basis? So am I guilty of that same fear? Of course I am, because it's going to impact me in how other people treat me, how other people interact with me. That's part of the reason I got into writing the book, because if I want that to be different, if I want that messaging to be different, if I don't want to dread getting older, I have to care about ageism and the messaging around aging. I have to care about it now when I am younger. Everyone really needs to be caring about it if you don't want that to apply to you as you get older. If you want it to be a more positive message, or if you just want to look forward to getting older in general and not having to fear it and dread it and spend a whole bunch of money trying to avoid it.
Yeah. I just thought about how I feel like in my own personal experience and journey, I've kind of had that piece around just like I've almost been excited to grow up in a way. And mind you, that's a very big different feeling and probably conversation when I'm in my 20s and I'm like, I can't wait until I'm 30. Truthfully, I haven't really been like, I can't wait for 40 and 50. I haven't said that yet, right? But I think what I'm thinking about in this moment is how there's something to look forward to at every, like, if you want to look at it in time frame of decades, right? Like there's always something to look forward to because there's all these different phases that we go through. Like maybe you go through the journey of, if you do decide to have kids, I know that's a different choice nowadays too. But then if you do, and then your kids decide to have kids, and then you're in this area and you're in this journey of being a grandparent, and that's a whole experience of itself. But there's always just something to look forward to. And I feel like that's maybe part of this shift in this perspective that we also bring to the table too. But I'd love for you to share too more about maybe it's like, what are some of the fears that people are experiencing, but what is the shift that needs to happen so that we are experiencing more joy in growing and aging and throughout all the years, not just when we're 70 and 80s and 60s and that, but even too, there's a piece around, those that are in their teens. And it's like, one day you're going to be 30 and it's not scary.
So there's a couple of things there. Number one, you make the point very nicely. We are all aging. It is not something old people do, right? And now we phrase it differently, and you phrased it differently just then. You said it's growing up versus aging.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. I mean,
so true.
Your babies are aging. Old people are growing up. I mean, it's just, they're really interchangeable, but it is the phrasing though that shows you the difference in that, we think about aging as kind of this negative thing, but we think about growing up as this positive thing. So
True.
maybe we need to shift those words. We need to talk about my 70-year-old self growing up.
Yeah.
And what am I going to be when I finally grow up and I'm 75, that kind of thing instead. I also think what you said is interesting about how, like, you haven't really thought about that it would be bad to be 40, 50. You're looking to that next milestone, 30. And I had a really interesting conversation with a friend of mine the other day. She just turned 40 and she was fine with it. She, great, 40, no problem, wasn't really bothering her. But what was interesting and what she was really noticing was how other people were talking to her about her 40th birthday. So other people were saying things to her like, oh, don't be sad about being 40. You look great. Or how are you feeling about being 40? And so she was really noticing what everyone else was saying to her about it, and that the messaging that she was getting from everyone else was what was making her pause and go, should I be upset that I'm 40? Should this be bothering me?
Yeah.
I think I look the same as I did at 39. I'm not sure what's the difference. And so I think that's a really important piece of it, because the way we speak to one another about our age and the kind of ageist comments that we might make to each other about our birthdays and things like that really do matter. And it's so common. I don't think we even think about it. We're just trying to give someone a compliment. You look great and we fill in the age. And what I really wish we could do is just kind of pause and say, you look great.
Yeah.
And not have an age associated with it, right? But I thought that was a really interesting thing she was experiencing that I had not thought about before, which was we would feel okay about our age if it wasn't for what everyone else around us said to us about our age. That's the thing that starts to bother us, because we feel like they're making a big deal about it, when if we were left to our own devices, we might not even pay attention.
Yeah, it's interesting how projection, right? I feel like that's where it comes from. It's us projecting our own like fears and insecurities onto someone else. And for those that maybe don't have this like strong sense of self, it could kind of play. You kind of start to play, and you're in the back of your head, and you're kind of like, wait a second. Do I actually look good? And then, next thing you have it, you're looking in the mirror and you're like picking apart, and it's like, and it's sad in ways too. And it's sad because going back to what you shared about, the messaging and hearing, it was your daughter, right? Your daughter talking about Bruce Springsteen, and right, like that messaging at 12 years old. And we're hearing that from such a young age, and that's being just drilled into us, and we carry that belief for years and years and years, and it's quite sad too, the fact that this projection that comes through, and it's the slight little messaging, right? Like even too, when you were just talking about, when you were at the beginning, when you were sharing how like we're seeing like, here's a good cream and here's Botox, it's like all of this is impacting the way that we think about aging.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and there's a lot of money to be made. I mean, the marketing budgets are large because there's a lot of money to be made off of the fear of aging. There's also, I really want to be clear too, I can't be mad at people for buying the anti-aging creams. I mean, I have some at home too, don't get me wrong. Because the ageism is a real thing. Ageism at work is a real thing. Ageism in daily life is a real thing. It impacts women more than it does men. Women are not allowed to age because as we age, we are discounted, we are ignored, we get passed over for promotions at work. And, as men get older, they become more distinguished. And and that, so it's not the same. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm preaching to them that they, absolutely should not get Botox or absolutely should not use a anti-aging cream if that's what's going to make them feel better. But I want us to, and again, have people treat them better at work, have them be able to continue in their careers. There's all kinds of things that are really, really do happen. But I think the more we think about it, the more we question it, the more aware we are of how it's impacting us, we can start to fight that process and start to fight that system that is saying, oh, you have to be forever young and you have to always be youthful. And, but I get why people do it, because it really does impact your day-to-day life in a very real way in terms of how other people treat you. And that matters.
Yeah. I don't know why I thought about this, but I feel like in ways it kind of correlates, but talking about how women get impacted, and, part of that process too is becoming mothers, should you choose to, and how that can be scary too, because, and no wonder we're having kids later in life, realistically, and more women are having children in their 30s. But it's interesting. The thought has been coming at the back of my mind recently around, I'm in the process of, I'm getting married later this year. And I'm now thinking, it's like, okay, then the next phase comes possibly having children. And then there's this very interesting dynamic that's been happening almost internally, where I'm like, how does that impact me with my full-time job, with my career, with what I'm creating and doing? How does this impact me? And it's just interesting, the different level of conversation that happens, and how, do women get then looked upon differently and passed up on promotions, like you were saying, because of this too. And it's interesting. It's just like this fear that has now been coming up now that I'm in this actual phase of it.
Yeah. And it's not men's fault necessarily, but it is different for men and women. Like if you have children, that will impact you differently than it does your husband. You will be the default parent. You will get all the phone calls from the school or from the daycare when someone is sick or needs to be picked up, or all those sorts of things. Even if your husband wants to be the person who is called, they will still call you first. And so
interesting.
It's going to take up space in your life in a different way than it will his. And that's not necessarily related to age. That's more just gender. But you're right. Yeah. It is the different phases, which are all part of the aging process. Again, some of which we really look forward to, right? Like becoming a parent, becoming a grandparent, and then some of which we don't. Wrinkles and gray hair.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to even just tell me more about the book as well. Like, what was, what's that core intention behind the book that you've written, and what you hope that people are going to receive from the book?
So you and I were talking a little bit before we started the podcast. My background is in adult development and aging. I have a PhD in that topic. And then I have been running a care management business for the last 12 years. And when I have all this training, right? I have all this academic training on working with older adults. And when I started my business, I really thought I was going to be working with 40-year-olds who were trying to navigate caring for their 70-year-old parents. And instead, I am working with 70-year-olds who are caring for their 90 or 95-year-old parents. And those 70-year-olds that I'm working with, they are almost always active, engaged, they're volunteering, they're running a business, they've started a nonprofit, they're caregiving, they're doing a bunch of different stuff that is not stereotypically what we think about a 70-year-old doing. We have all these kind of stereotypes about, retiring and playing a lot of golf and sitting on your couch and maybe traveling some, things like that. But we don't think about all the activities and engagement and purpose that these individuals still often have. And so I got into writing the book for a couple of reasons. Part of the book is about thinking about your older adulthood and planning for it appropriately. Because as a care manager, one of the things I see all the time is that people don't plan for their own older adulthood. Again, I think this is because of ageism and because we fear it. It's kind of this, if I don't plan, if I don't write a will, I won't die.
Yeah, the avoidance. The avoidance that we
right?
think.
If I don't do any end of life planning, then my end of life will never come, sort of stuff. So there's a chapter in the book called "Hope is not a plan." Right? We actually need to make plans and have discussions about what we want as we get older. So part of the book is about that. But in that planning, I also talk a lot about the fact that our stereotypes about older adulthood, what you think it's going to be like, are quite wrong. And that you have a lot of opportunity for years and years of purpose and engagement and things that give your life meaning, not just playing golf and traveling. Those things are great. It's great to do fun stuff in the quote retirement years, but they're also only fun because you do them sometimes when all you do is that stuff. It's like a vacation. A vacation is really fun, but it's also fun because it ends, right? Like you go do it and then you come back and then you go do it again and then you come back and go back to work or whatever else is going on in your life. So endless retirement where it's just nothing but leisure is actually quite boring. And there's a lot of research about that now, that if people retire and they just sit around and do nothing, it's fun for about 18 months to 2 years. And then they kind of go,
what am I doing with my life?
What am I going to do with my life? Right? What am I going to do when I grow up and retire? That's exactly it. So the book is planning for those years as well, to think about rethinking your perception of what older adulthood is, rethinking your perception of retirement, and planning for years of purpose and engagement and, what you're going to want to do that's going to make you want to get out of bed on a Wednesday morning during those, again, quote, retirement years. And I keep saying quote because retirement technically means no longer working.
Right.
And very few people who go into retirement actually completely no longer work. Most of them still work part-time. They start their dream business. They do all kinds of things. So they stopped working their first job.
Yeah.
They've started something else. So that's, I wrote the book, I think, as much for myself as for anyone else, because I need to think about it again, how I thought about it, even with all my academic training on older adulthood. I was thinking about it all wrong. And I have been so delighted and inspired by the people I've worked with in this career that I need to rethink how I'm viewing those years and what I'm going to want to do, just like everybody else does. So it's for me. And then also, hey, everybody else, I think you should do this too.
Yeah, 100%. We always it always comes from something that we're passionate and inspired by, and then we all get to benefit from that too. I'm curious, like, what's been the biggest surprise in your own shift of maybe what you thought before and maybe since, or what's been the thing that has surprised you the most, or also too, what was that stereotype that surprised you the most and completely shifted for you in the way that you thought about aging?
Well, the biggest thing I think is that I now notice ageism all the time everywhere because it's kind of a constant. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I was giving a presentation on ageism to a women's group not that long ago, and there was a friend that I had not seen in a while. And I walked into the room, and she very kindly said to me, "You look amazing. It's like you're aging backwards."
Mm.
And I was there to give a program about ageism. And so, and I did pick on her a little bit in the program, because I said, here's what she just said to me when I walked in. And she means it. What she's trying to say is, you look great.
Yes.
I haven't seen you in a while. You look terrific. I'm so glad to see you. That kind of stuff. Why do we have to tie it to you're aging backwards? Why is that a compliment? I don't want to be 20 again. I don't want to be 15 again. And so things like that. And if you will just listen, you will hear this stuff all the time. And I really have to control myself, because I almost always now want to jump in and be like, can we talk about why you said that? Can we talk about why you said it that way? And couldn't we say it this way, and it would be just as good, if not better? And not, there are times and places where that's an appropriate thing to do, and then there's times where it's not. My poor children are mortified, because anytime they say something, I'm like, let's talk about that. When I had my most recent birthday, my daughter was like, "Oh, you don't look 49." And I said, "What does a 49-year-old look like?" And she's like, "Oh God." she knew we were getting ready to go down this path, right? Like, it's just, I cannot unsee it now. And just in everything from work situations to healthcare situations to just everyday conversations, it is just pervasive. And that's good that I see it now, and also challenging.
Yeah, because that's the lens, right? That you are just seeing things through, and it's exactly what you said. You can't unsee it. It's hard to unsee it, and I think in ways it's not yes, there's going to be time and places to kind of quote unquote like just question, right? Like that, call somebody out for lack of better words on it. I think there's times and places for it, and such a good thing to do that, because that's what gets people thinking, and that's
Right.
what gets people to change, because a lot of the times we're saying things without even any awareness of where it's even coming from.
Right.
And I noticed that when, I know it doesn't have anything to do with aging, but obviously it's just a big period of my life of, as soon as my fiance and I got engaged, it was like, "Oh, you're going to have the most beautiful babies." And I'm like, hold on a second. Hold on. When did Ashley ever say, like, I wanted to have kids? It's like this assumption that's placed. And so for a period of time, and because I was really battling and struggling with this, my own fears around becoming a mother, and what does that mean, and what does that look like? And so I kind of made it a point to kind of call out my family in a sense, and kind of just say, like, yeah, if I choose, when they would kind of play around with it. And I'm like, yeah, if I decide to. And so I think it's important to do that, because of this, just bringing awareness to it, and not excusing ourselves too, right? I think there's a lot of that in just taking that pause and hold on a sec. Let me rethink about what just came out of my mouth and what I just said. And yeah, it's the same thing I think with the ageism. And now I feel like I'm going to come from this whole other lens too. From our conversation, I'm going to be thinking about this in a whole new way, and I'm probably going to start to see it everywhere.
Well, and you will notice, part of it is just, it's so ingrained. It's just everyday conversation, right? Like you see somebody and it's their birthday, and you go, "You look great for," and you fill in the age, right? And you don't even think about it. That's just what we say, kind of thing. And to your example, when somebody gets married, we start talking about when you're going to have a baby. As soon as you have a baby, then the next conversation starter is when you're going to have another one. I wrote a book. You wouldn't believe how many conversations I have now that start off with, "Well, when are you writing another one?"
Right?
And I'm like, I just got this one done. Right? Can't we just celebrate this accomplishment? I don't, but just all the time. Well, are you going to write another one? When's the second one
Mhm.
coming out? And I'm like, I don't know. When are you going to write your first book?
Yeah. We're
It's
we're
just-
basking in this one. We're embracing this one right now
right.
and really
But
sitting with this one.
but I think it is, to our point, the pattern. It's just the pattern of
Yeah.
conversation. And it's not that somebody is trying to put pressure on me really to write another book. It's just that
Right.
they're trying to have a conversation and show
Yeah.
that they're interested in my life. And the same thing is true when it comes to some of these ageist statements or conversations that we have. It's just part of our typical conversational pattern. We don't mean anything by it, but it does impact the person we're saying it to go back to the example of my friend who just turned 40. All these people who are saying things to her about her turning 40, they don't necessarily mean anything by it, or if they do, they mean something positive. You look great for 40, that kind of thing. But what it's doing internally to her is making her go, should I be upset that I'm 40? Right. Like making her rethink it in a way that she wouldn't if everyone around her wasn't saying the same thing to her over and over again. And that's the point. It's like, because people will sometimes say to me when I'm doing they're like, it's not a big deal. It's just like it's just the way we talk. I mean, it's not a big deal. But I think she's a perfect example of why it is a big deal, because when everybody says those same things over and over again, it sends you a message like you should be worried or upset that you just turned 40. This is something to be concerned about, because everybody around her is making those kinds of comments.
Yeah. I don't know if we kind of talked about this, but I'm curious because I see it. I mean, even my fiance and I, like, we having these conversations, and I know he kind of feels, I don't know if it's pressure, I don't know if it's fear, but like I can tell by some of the things that he says, it's kind of like, oh no, I'm almost 40. You know what I mean? It's the dreadfulness. What is it? Like, not everyone is going to have the same fears, but what are you seeing that is the most common thing? And maybe by you saying something, it's kind of like, yeah, I relate with that. But yeah, why are we so afraid?
I think we are afraid for a couple of reasons. One, we are all afraid of our health declining, which does happen as we get older. We're all going to have health issues. And almost everybody that I interviewed in the book that is in their 70s doing amazing things, they all have health issues. One of the people I interviewed has had 2 heart attacks. I mean, other people have had cancer diagnoses. So they do have health issues. And I think, especially when we are young and very healthy, that seems terrifying. The thing that I have learned from working with older adults is that everybody's going to have health problems. That's you may have arthritis, I may have heart attacks, but who knows? We're all going to have health issues. We can do everything in our power to prevent that, but we're probably going to have health issues. The thing that we don't think about when we are younger is how resilient we are and how adaptable we are. Because again, all those people I interviewed who are in their 70s doing amazing things, they have these health issues and they're still starting new businesses, running nonprofits, caregiving, doing all these amazing things. And we're so adaptable, we're so resilient. I think it just terrifies us when we're young and healthy to think about ever having any significant health issues. And I get that. I mean, that's a legitimate fear. We're really resilient and we're really adaptable, and you will be too when those things start to occur. So that's the first thing that I think people fear. The second thing that I think people fear is becoming irrelevant and becoming invisible. And again, this is the ageism. We tend to ignore people as they get older. We tend to devalue them. And I mean, you can just see in our healthcare system and in our work life that older people aren't listened to, they aren't paid attention to, and everyone fears that. No one wants to become that. And again, my point is, the way we change that is by changing how you and I, when we are younger, work with, interact with, value people that are older than us. Because the only way, if you don't like how older people are treated and viewed, The only way we're going to change that is if you and I work on how we treat and view older people. And that is part of my goal of the book too. But I mean, it's a legitimate fear. I have had in my work, I have had 95-year-olds who were living at home who needed to move into a retirement community of some kind make statements like, I don't want to go live with those old people. And it's not because they don't know how old they are. It's, again, it's the othering. I'm trying to keep myself separate from those old people. If I don't go live with those, quote, old people, you won't perceive me as old. And I mean, that's it. And it's a legitimate fear, but the way we change that is by changing how we view growing older.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so much in that. Oh my gosh. It's so true. It's so true because as human beings, one of our core needs is to feel seen, right? Like to feel seen. And of course, and I think I'm just in this moment of just, wow, like it's created a shift for me at least. And I think that's part of it is, and part of your goal, but it's truly created such a shift in just how I interact with those that are older than me, and just being able to really shift this conversation and to support, because also too, it's like, yes, as we get older, there is going to be support that we'll need. We are like, our bodies are going to change. And that's also a piece and a fact of this whole entire thing. And then we, in a way as well, are kind of stopping ourselves from receiving support, making it even worse too, right? Thinking about the woman who didn't want to go live with those people. It's like, and then what strain are you putting on your body now? And even more because you don't want that help. You're so persistent on not having that help.
All the time in care management, it is amazing how people will fight to, I'll say, keep their independence, but it's not even that, but fight using a walker, fight using any sort of assistive, fight using hearing aids, right? Like I won't put in hearing aids so that they can have social interactions and conversations with loved ones, because they don't want to be perceived as old by wearing hearing aids. And it's like you're shooting yourself in your foot. But it's that fear. It's that fear of aging, of being perceived by other people as getting older, that keeps them from doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's just this kind of going back to like what we see. And I think it's important to name it out loud. It's when we see aging and we see those that are in their 80s and 90s, we think of fragile. That's what we think of. We think of fragile, we think of weak. And what does that plant in our head? But I think for me, it's like seeing, the shift of how much wisdom and wise comes with aging, and it's these literal little tiny micro shifts that we can make in our language, in our perception, and that changes things too, and creates less of that fear. There was the piece around planning that I wanted to come back to for a moment. Planning about aging, planning about that time. What does that look like in terms of planning? Maybe there's something that you can share. I know people can go in and purchase your book, but and I'm curious more so, how does that look, planning for 80s when you are in your 20s, and then how does that look like when you're in your 30s and your 50s? Like I can imagine, maybe I'm assuming that it's going to change and look different. Maybe it doesn't.
So I think we are really good as a society at talking about financial planning for getting older, right? Like there's all the time retirement planning for your finances. My point would be that you also need to plan for your aging in terms of your social and emotional life, right? And your purpose What are you gonna, it doesn't have to be work, but what is gonna be purpose? Because again, we'll go back to the talking about just retiring and doing nothing. That is terrible for you. That is the fastest way to decline. If you want your health to decline, retire and do nothing. Right?
Yeah.
Or retire and just play golf, right? Like,
Yep.
or because that doesn't give you a real reason to get out of bed for most people. So when you are thinking about growing older, you need to be thinking about not only money. Money is important, 100%, but you also need to be thinking about, where am I going to get my social connections? Because a lot of people get their social connections through work, right? You spend a lot of time at work with people talking, you hang out with people from work, sometimes on the weekends or after work. And then when you retire, you don't have work anymore. All your friends
Yeah.
are still going to work and you're not. So where are you going to get your social connections? Where are you going to get your emotional connections? Are you married? Do you have kids? Like, who's going to be your companionship? All those sorts of emotional needs that you're going to have too. You have to renegotiate relationships after you retire. When my dad has always run his own business and worked basically from home, and my mom retired. And when she retired, he automatically assumed that she was free to be his constant companion and do everything that he wanted to do with her. And it took about 6 months before she went back to work part-time because she was like, this is great, but I can only take so much. And and that's a really common thing, actually. There was actually a New York Times article. There was a great quote in it once that said, I said for better and for worse, but not for lunch every single day of the week, like in terms of being married to each other. And so they just can't, you have to renegotiate those relationships and anticipate that things are going to be different once you retire, and plan for that. Do you and your spouse even have the same idea of what retirement is going to be like? I think I'll probably always work. I really can't imagine retiring. I like what I do. Unless I've become physically unable to do it, I can't imagine retiring. My husband would retire tomorrow. And so we have really different views of what that might be like. And that's gonna, he's gonna want to retire and have certain plans. And I'm going to be going, well, I'm going to work today. I don't know what you're doing. So having all these conversations, and one point I love to make, think about all the planning. If you went to college, think about all the planning that went into picking a college. Those 4 years of your life, right? 4 years. Picking a college, picking a major, all the classes you got, all the personality assessments, all that sort of stuff for this 4-year college, right?
Yeah.
Retirement can be 20 or 30 years of your life. And we do almost no planning for it other than money. That's the only planning. Yeah. I really think there should be, like, we should all have to take a course that says here is what we're all going to think about, what we're all going to do to plan for our emotional well-being, our social well-being, our purpose in these 20 or 30 years of your life.
Yeah, I remember doing or learning about this wheel of life, and that's what I think about in this moment, right? You're so spot on. And I definitely didn't think about all those other pieces and those other elements. But that's what I think about, is the wheel of life, and how are you going to, and that changes with every kind of phase of our lives, with every, new decade, whatever you want to look at it. But all of these areas of your life, how are you really balancing all of those and integrating all of those? Because the way that I have always looked at the wheel of life is it being kind of like this like pillar foundation. And when you think of when something is kind of, you miss or you lose one aspect of it, let's say the financial aspect, if that's the only pillar that you have standing, of course, your kind of structure is going to crumble. You're not going to have anything else to stand on. But at least if there's that financial piece that kind of goes, you still have these other pillars in your life that are still holding you up while you plan or kind of sort out that financial piece too. So it's no different later on in life when we age, when we are in our retirement phase. It doesn't change. And it's such a beautiful thing that it's like the principles and the tools that we use to plan. It's a matter of bringing that into all areas of our lives. And later.
Lost you for a second. I'm sorry. I didn't
That's
catch
okay.
the end of what you said.
No, I was just saying how it applies to every single area of our lives. Like it, even later on, these fundamental tools that we bring into planning, it looks the same too later on in life. We can't just always focus on the money aspect, the financial piece.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, the financial piece is essential, but yeah, just like you need all those other pieces when you're young, you need all those other pieces in your older adulthood as well. And we just don't think about it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing how we just assume that you retire and you go off and everything is bliss. And we don't think about it anymore.
Nope. Not the case. So I would love for you to, I always end off episodes with asking my guest, if you could distill your, one piece of advice into kind of one sentence or a little bit, what's your one piece of advice?
So I have a little sticker that I keep up here beside my computer, and I'll actually grab it just to show you that I'm telling you the truth. And it says, fears are paper tigers. And I keep that kind of in front of me all the time because I, like everyone else, have fears. And I have to kind of remind myself that they're paper tigers, right? They're not real. Just because I'm thinking something doesn't mean that it's true. But I put it up there because I, like a lot of people, I think, will let my fears stop me from doing something. And I'm really working hard to work through that. Writing a book. I mean, there's a bunch of fear there. Is anybody going to read it? Is it going to be any good? Is it going to make any sense? Is there any point in me even doing this? Yeah. And it's like, just there's a book called Emotional Agility. And she says in there that courage is just fear walking, right? Courage is
I love
not denying your fears. It's fear walking and just kind of, I think that is so important, both in my daily life, right? Overcoming my fears, keep going, doing the things that I'm trying to accomplish. But then also, I think it's really important too, as we think about growing older and aging, because these fears that we have about growing older that make us do this kind of us versus them or denial of aging and that kind of thing, that those fears are what keep us from really planning and thinking about how we can make them the best possible years that we could have. And, it's what keeps people from writing a will. It's what keeps people from really doing their financial planning. It's what keeps people buying the creams and all the things. And so I really love this little Post-it note because I think it's really important to remember that they're just paper tigers. You can't, they're not real tigers. They're not going to bite you, but they will keep you from doing things that you really need to do and that you love doing.
And experiencing the joy too, right? Like think about when we're in this avoidance of something, and of course it's oftentimes some sort of fear. When we are in avoidance, it kind of is stopping us from simply experiencing more joy, just taking care of the thing, whatever it's, write the will, right? Take care of it and let it be. And it's there and it's good and it's taken care of. And then you go back, you live, you go back to living, you go back to experiencing the joy. I'd love for you to share too, where people can either connect with you, follow you, or purchase the book.
Sure. So everything can be done through my website, which is CorinneAmin.com. There's a link for the book there. All my social media links are there. So if you're looking to follow me anywhere, everything is there that you could possibly want.
Amazing. Oh, this has been such an incredible conversation. Corinne, thank you so much for joining me, for sharing your experience, your expertise, your perspective on aging and all of this, and just bringing forth this conversation. I love having the conversations that we aren't having necessarily. I love diving into this. So I appreciate you. I appreciate this time, this conversation. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media. And we'll see you in the next episode.